kind of standing there staring at like Katie's nasty, dirty, disgusting body because they didn't even wipe her out.
What you are watching right now is 28-year-old John Blauvelt, an ex-military recruiter, trash-talking his own dead wife. A wife that John killed all because he fell in love with a 17-year-old girl.
Look at her, she's right here.
I want to look at her.
That's your friend.
Well, yeah, me and Hannah were dating.
I don't want to do this anymore.
Don't want to do what? Don't want to help us find out who killed her?
Over the course of 6 years, these two thought they could live the perfect fairy tale after Katie's murder, ruining several lives and fleeing across the country, leaving chaos in their wake. But in the interrogation we have for you today, it all comes crumbling down.
I lost a friend. Maybe not the best wife, but I lost a friend. I don't give a I can get over this.
I'm just going to ask you point blank. Did you kill Katie?
This is one of the most chilling true crime stories in recent American history, and this one will leave your mind reeling. Most people only remember the version that made the news. Subscribe to stay inside closed cases. The basement is silent, cold, damp, stale. The kind of quiet that feels like it's breathing. A single beam of a flashlight cuts across a cement box in the corner. The box that two desperate friends have just cracked open. They had been searching for hours for any sign of their missing friend, a 22-year-old PetSmart employee who vanished after her shift. Then they see it, a shape, skin, a knife still lodged in her throat, and one of the girls lets out a scream so raw it sounds like it's tearing the house apart from the inside. Katie Biter had been missing less than a day. But the brutality of what her friends stumbled upon, it was the kind of horror that doesn't leave a town for decades. Minutes later, while police swarm the abandoned house, another kind of scene is unfolding just miles away. Inside a military office, 28-year-old Army recruiter John Blauvelt sits emotionless as police notify him of his wife's death. No tears, no panic, no shock, just confusion over why he's being recorded. And yet he knows something he shouldn't know. Something detectives pick up on almost instantly. When they mention a certain abandoned house, a location never released to the public, his body tightens. His eyes shift. He suddenly requests a lawyer. A lawyer for a house he isn't supposed to know is part of the crime scene. This is where the story begins to split open. Because the man sitting across from detectives, casual, almost relaxed, is the same man Katie had been terrified of for months. The same man she told her family might kill her. The same man who had just moved a 17-year-old girl into their marital bedroom the moment Katie walked out the door. But this story isn't simple. It stretches across years. Lies, manipulation, teenagers pulled into a world far darker than they understood, and a marriage collapsing long before the knife was ever lifted. And although police were already suspicious of John, what they were about to unravel would expose a hidden motive far more disturbing than jealousy or anger. Because this was never just about a failing marriage. It was about control, obsession, and the illusion that he could build a new life with someone who wasn't even old enough to vote. But what no one expected was how deeply involved the teenage girl was, how much she knew, and how far they would run when the walls finally closed in. But before all of that, before the lies, the interrogation videos, and the nationwide manhunt, there was October 24th, 2016, the day Katie walked out of her shift and never made it home. Because the last person to see her alive wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a co-worker. It was someone she trusted enough to meet, even when she shouldn't have. And that's exactly where everything went wrong. But what no one expected was how quickly John began unraveling the moment detectives pressed even the smallest cracks in his story. So what was he really hiding? When detectives brought John back just a few days after the initial death notification, they already had concerns. His calmness, his lack of questions, his sudden anxiety when the abandoned house was mentioned. But it was during this follow-up interview, when they read him his rights, that things truly began to shift. John sat back casually, slouched in his chair, talking as if detectives were old friends asking about a breakup, not a homicide. He described Katie as dramatic, manipulative, angry, someone who just caused problems. This is a familiar pattern in domestic violence cases. The abuser painting the victim as unstable, irrational, impossible to deal with. John leaned into this narrative with every breath. But the detectives weren't listening to his excuses. They were listening for inconsistencies. And they didn't have to wait long. He told them he and Katie were constantly fighting, but he insisted he never got violent. He mentioned her filing a domestic violence report, but claimed it was just her childish way of getting attention. He insisted he didn't care about her dating others, because he wasn't dating anyone. all while ignoring the massive neon-lit fact he was openly living with a 17-year-old girl. Her name was Hannah, a teenager he met while recruiting at a high school. John invited her and another teen girl, Allie, to live with him after Hannah claimed she was having issues at home. But strangely, he never offered that same help to any teenage boys. Detectives took note, but the red flags didn't stop there. Because right as Katie finally escaped John's home, Hannah's father reported her missing, leading to a 4-hour police standoff where John refused to come out. This resulted in a charge of contributing to the delinquency of a minor and opened the door to Katie telling police the truth. John had pulled a gun on her and threatened to kill her. This wasn't a petty relationship spat, this was escalation. And when she left him, she took something he did not want to lose: control. As detectives gently guided the conversation, John rambled on. He bragged about being forgiving. He claimed Katie always came crawling back. He said he'd planned to reunite with her after his court date, if the domestic violence case didn't ruin his military career. He even admitted he didn't care that she had moved on with new boyfriends. But his tone betrayed him. His jaw tightened, his voice wavered. Detectives could hear the resentment bleeding through. Because while he pretended her dating others didn't bother him, he was simultaneously living with, controlling, and isolating a teenage girl. And then came the detail detectives were waiting for: the viewing. John described going alone because he was afraid Katie's family might shoot him in the face. He mocked their grief. He called Katie's body nasty, dirty, disgusting. He said the funeral home didn't even wipe her down. Then he said the worst part wasn't his wife lying dead in front of him. It was that there was no one else in the room. Not her family, not her friends, not anyone who loved her, just him and Hannah, a grown man, bringing his teenage girlfriend to his wife's viewing. Detectives had seen cold, they had seen manipulative, they had seen cruel, but this was something else. And as the interview continued, a new question began forming. If John didn't kill Katie, why did he seem so comfortable talking about her death? Why no tears? Why no fear? Why no questions? And if he did kill her, what exactly did Hannah know? Because investigators were about to discover a timeline detail that shattered John's entire alibi and exposed a dark secret buried in the trunk of his Prius. But when detectives traced John's movements on the night of October 24th, they found something he never counted on: hard evidence that would destroy his carefully rehearsed story. John claimed his day was simple. He left work between 2 and 3 p.m. He went home. He took his dog running on the trails behind the house. He sat by a creek. He relaxed. He was peaceful, sober, reflective. He said Hannah was with him the whole time. He said his roommates, Crystal and Brandon, were home too. He said nothing unusual happened. But investigators were already talking to Hannah, and she had a very different version of the evening. John told detectives he and Hannah later left the house to meet a guy named Scott so John could collect money owed from a car crash. That part wasn't the issue. The issue was what happened before that. Witnesses reported seeing John and Hannah loading trash bags into the back of John's Prius. Thick, heavy bags. The kind that sagged from weight, not from towels or trash. Detectives confronted him. John didn't hesitate. "Oh yeah," he said casually. "That was dog diarrhea. Marley had one of his huge blowouts." He claimed he used multiple towels, bleach, a Swiffer, and those trash bags were simply too full for their home trash bin. So he tossed them into random dumpsters around town. A normal person might hesitate. They might look uncomfortable lying. John didn't blink. But detectives already had the surveillance footage. Those weren't towels. Those weren't cleaning rags. Those weren't dog messes. Inside those bags, investigators would later find clothing worn during the murder, blood-soaked items, a weapon, and items belonging to Katie. Every bit of it tied directly back to the crime scene in the abandoned house. And John had just placed himself in the middle of it. With Hannah right beside him, detectives shifted gears. What time exactly did you leave home? What time did you eat? Who else was home? Why didn't you ask what happened to Katie? John kept giving vague answers. I don't know. Maybe. It was dark, probably around 7. Could have been later. I can't really remember. When the timeline in a homicide keeps slipping through a suspect's fingers, detectives call it memory fog, not the natural kind, the guilty kind. And then came the bombshell. The phone ping. Katie's cell phone, found buried in that cement box, showed communication between her and John that very afternoon. She had been asking him for one thing: her dog's medical records. Records John refused to hand over. Records he said she was just using as an excuse to see him. That message was sent shortly before the time detectives believe Katie drove to meet him. John never mentions this meeting. He never admits seeing her. He never admits leaving the house. Because if he did, the entire facade of his innocence collapses. But detectives were already piecing it together, and what they discovered next was even darker than they expected. Katie wasn't lured to the abandoned house by a stranger. She went there to meet John, and she trusted him enough to go alone. But the biggest revelation was still coming, because Hannah, the 17-year-old caught in John's web, was about to break. And what she confessed would confirm detectives' worst fears. But even after detectives tied John to the crime, the case took a final, shocking turn. One that would send investigators on a chase across the country. Detectives finally sat down with Hannah, and unlike John, she wasn't calm. She was terrified. Her hands shook. Her voice trembled. She hesitated with every answer. But one detail slipped out. On the night of the murder, John left the house without her. He had told her not to ask questions. He said he'd be back soon. When he returned, he was sweating, frantic, and carrying the trash bags. Those same bags he later threw into dumpsters all over town. And when detectives pressed harder, Hannah cracked. John had told her Katie was gone. He said she wouldn't be a problem anymore. He said they'd start fresh, and then he made her help him clean. Not because he wanted help, but because he needed control. When detectives confronted John with this, he shut down. The calm facade fractured. His jaw clenched. His eyes darkened. He stopped talking. Days later, when police issued a warrant for his arrest, John vanished. He took Hannah with him. A teenage girl, now an accessory to a murder she had been too scared to understand. For 6 weeks, they fled across the country. Through small towns, across state lines, bouncing between motels, living in shadows. John cut his hair. Hannah dyed hers. They survived on cash and lies. But fugitives always slip. They were finally captured in Oregon, more than 2,500 miles from the crime scene. Hannah, still just a teenager, broke down immediately. She admitted everything she had seen, everything she had done out of fear, everything she now understood too late. John, on the other hand, acted as though he were inconvenienced by the arrest. And even years later, during trial proceedings and statements, he maintained the same coldness he showed during the interrogation. The same coldness Katie had feared. The same coldness detectives felt the moment they saw his reaction to her death. Katie Biter trusted the wrong person. She believed the man she married wouldn't hurt her. She believed she could meet him alone for something as simple as her dog's records. But predators don't look like monsters. They look like people you've known for years. And John Blauvelt hid behind a uniform, behind his youth, behind his charm, while building a secret life with a teenage girl, and a future he thought nothing could corrupt. But the truth always surfaces, even under cement, even after lies, even across state lines. If you found this story as chilling as we did, comment your thoughts and stay with us. Because in the world of true crime, every uncovered lie leads to another truth waiting beneath it. And some of those truths are far darker than we're prepared to face.